In 1954, the last emperor of Vietnam walked into a Rolex boutique in Geneva and asked for the rarest watch they had. What they handed him sold 60 years later for $5 million. What's scary, it's not the wildest Rolex on this list. Today, we're counting down 10 Rolexes so rare that money alone can't buy them. We're talking a submariner built for James Bond, a prototype strapped to the outside of a submersible and sent to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a Daytona so scarce only 3 exist on the planet, and a watch that was once given away to a boyfriend for free but later shattered every record in auction history. First up, it's James Bond's Rolex Submariner 5513. In 1973, the production team behind Live and Let Die needed a submariner for Roger Moore's first outing as Bond. But they didn't just strap on a stock 5513 and call it a day. They modified it into a fully functional film prop. The bezel? Converted into a rotating buzzsaw that could cut through ropes on camera. The case? Rigged with magnetic properties strong enough to deflect bullets. At least in Bond's world. But here's the kicker. This wasn't a throwaway prop. The case back was engraved Roger Moore 007. A direct link between the actor, the character, and the object. Over the decades, the watch developed a natural bronze patina on its hands and markers. That's the kind of character you can't replicate. You can only earn it through age and story. When it finally hit auction at Christie's in 2015, collectors treated it like a relic. Final price? $445,000. Not bad for a gadget watch that helped Bond escape a crocodile farm. But if you thought a buzzsaw Rolex was wild, the next watch doesn't need gadgets. It became priceless because of the man who never took it off, through 18 major championships and 50 years of history. At number 9, it's Jack Nicklaus's 1967 Rolex Day-Date 36. It's the watch that proves rarity isn't always about production numbers. Sometimes it's about a life. Rolex gifted this Day-Date, the president, to Jack Nicklaus in 1967. Champagne dial, classic gold case. Nothing exotic about the spec sheet. But Nicklaus wore it every single day for over 50 years, through 18 major championship wins, through decades on the tour, through every handshake and trophy lift and unforgettable moment on the green. But here's the twist. Some watches are rare because only a handful exist. This one is rare because only one example lived that life. The watch didn't earn its value in a factory. It earned it on the course. When it finally went to auction at Phillips in 2019, collectors treated it like a final round at Augusta. It sold for $1.22 million, roughly the price of a 3-bedroom house in Manhattan, and every cent was donated to the Nicklaus Children's Healthcare Foundation. A watch becomes a legacy object when its story is bigger than the metal. And the next Rolex? It didn't spend decades under stadium lights. It survived the jungles of a Vietnam War set, because its owner refused to take it off, and the studio couldn't make him. At number 8, it's Marlon Brando's Rolex GMT Master 1675. It's the watch that got into a fight with a film studio, and won. During filming for Apocalypse Now in 1979, Marlon Brando played the unhinged Colonel Kurtz. The costume department wanted the watch off. Brando wanted it on. The studio pushed. Brando pushed harder. The compromise became legend. Brando popped off the bezel entirely, turning a standard GMT Master 1675 into a stripped-down, raw, utilitarian tool watch that looked like it had been through an actual war. No bezel. Worn plexiglass crystal. Just a black dial and a rebellious edge that perfectly matched the character. But here's the move that made it one of a kind. Brando hand-engraved M. Brando on the caseback. Not machine-engraved. Hand-engraved. By the man himself. After filming, the watch vanished. For decades, no one knew where it was. It sat in a drawer, its location unknown, its legend growing with every year it stayed out of reach. When it finally resurfaced through Brando's family, some predicted it could fetch $4 million. The final price at Phillips in 2019, $1.95 million. Not the predicted ceiling, but still enough to buy a house in Beverly Hills for a watch with no bezel. Now, if you think surviving a jungle film set is tough, the next Rolex didn't just survive an environment. It was engineered to conquer the deepest place on Earth, and only 7 were ever made. At number 7, it's the Rolex Deep Sea Special Prototype. It's the watch Rolex never sold, because it was never meant for a wrist. In the 1950s, Rolex built an experimental watch designed to survive the ocean's deepest depths. Not marketing deep, not brochure deep, deep enough to strap onto the outside of a submersible and send it more than 3,000 meters underwater. In 1953, one of these prototypes joined the bathyscaphe Trieste and set a record at 3,150 meters. Then in 1960, an updated version rode with Jacques Piccard to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, 10,916 meters down. For context, that's deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Rolex's modern Sea Dweller is celebrated for handling 1,220 meters. In the 50s, they were sending watches to a depth nearly 9 times that. Only 7 prototypes were ever made between 1953 and 1960. Each one has an oversized, dome-shaped crystal built to withstand crushing pressure. None were ever offered to the public. You couldn't buy one then. You can't hunt one down now. But here's the kicker. The very first prototype, known as Number 1, appeared at Christie's in 2021 and sold for $2.3 million, a world record in both depth and price for a watch that literally stared into the abyss. And the next Rolex? It never went near the ocean. But its nickname tells you everything about how raw and primal it is, because Rolex never repeated its design. Not once. At number 6, it's the Rolex Daytona 6240, the Neanderthal. It's the missing link in the Daytona bloodline. Released around 1965, the 6240 was the first Cosmograph Daytona to feature screw-down chronograph pushers, a genuine mechanical evolution for a model built around speed and precision timing. But here's what makes it a collector's obsession: the dial. Instead of the usual balanced layout, the 6240 has oversized, big-eye subdials that dominate the face. They're so large there's no room for the words Daytona or even Cosmograph. Black background, white subdials, a bright outer track that makes the whole thing feel aggressive, raw, and unmistakably different from anything Rolex made before or since. That's the key phrase: before or since. Rolex never repeated this dial configuration. In collecting, never repeated is the sound of rarity tightening its grip. Think of the 6240 as the evolutionary bridge between the earliest Daytonas and the refined Paul Newman models that came after. The missing link, the Neanderthal. Very few survive. When one surfaced at Phillips in 2018, it fetched over $3 million. If your jaw's on the floor and you want more deep dives into the watches, cars, and collections billionaires fight over, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more legendary pieces coming, and the top 5 on this list are about to get truly insane. And if the next 5 didn't blow your mind, wait, because the next Rolex was never meant for you. Rolex made exactly 12 and gave every single one away to racing drivers. At number 5, it's the Rolex Anti-Magnétique. It's the secret weapon Rolex built for the racetrack, and then never spoke about again. Only 12 were ever made. Let that number settle. 12. And Rolex didn't sell a single one. Every reference 4113 was gifted directly to select racing teams and drivers as a timing instrument for motorsport. This wasn't a luxury object. It was a precision tool disguised as a wristwatch. The split seconds complication let users time 2 events simultaneously, an advanced capability that demanded space. That's why the 4113 has a massive 44mm case, enormous by 1942 standards. For comparison, a modern submariner is 41mm. Yet the whole thing is cased in plain stainless steel. No gold, no diamonds, no flash. That's the collector's paradox. Enormous historical importance, completely understated execution. Finding one in the wild is every serious collector's fantasy. When a 4113 hit the auction block at Phillips in 2016, that fantasy turned into a bidding war. Final price? $2.4 million. And here's the thing. That might sound lower than some entries on this list, but you can't order another one. 12 exist. The wait list isn't long. It's closed. Permanently. Now imagine a Rolex so rare that collectors didn't even believe it existed, until three surfaced out of nowhere and caused an earthquake in the watch world. At number 4, it's the Rolex Daytona 6263, the legend. It's the holy grail nobody knew to hunt for. Before 2013, the watch world believed no gold Daytona with a Paul Newman lemon dial and oyster case had ever been manufactured. It was considered a configuration that Rolex simply never made. Then one surfaced, then a second, then a third. 3 examples, total, on the planet. The dial features a bright lemon yellow coloration with white subdial print, flamboyant, unmistakable, paired with an 18-karat yellow gold case that makes the whole thing pop like nothing else in the Daytona catalog. Before these appeared, collectors had no idea this variant was even possible. The discovery didn't just add a watch to the market, it rewrote the history of what Rolex had produced. In 2022, one of the 3 legends went to Christie's and sold for $2.9 million. Maybe not the single most expensive Rolex ever, but try buying one. 3 pieces worldwide means the wait list has exactly 0 openings. 3 is bonkers. But the next watch? It was made for an emperor, literally. And when he walked into the boutique, he had one instruction. Give me the rarest thing you've got. At number 3, it's the Rolex Bao Dai Reference 6062, the Emperor's Watch. It's the watch that turned a retail visit into a piece of royal history. In 1954, Bao Dai, the last emperor of Vietnam, walked into a Rolex boutique in Geneva and asked for the rarest watch in the shop. What Rolex presented him was a one-of-a-kind Reference 6062, a gold oyster perpetual with a triple calendar, moon phase complication, black dial, and diamond hour markers at the even positions 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. For context, the 6062 is already one of the most complex watches Rolex ever cased in the classic oyster shell. Only 3 black dial 6062s with diamond markers are known to exist, and this is the only one with diamonds placed at the even hours. 1 configuration, 1 owner, 1 watch. After the emperor's passing, the Bao Dai appeared at auction multiple times, and each time it made headlines. It set a record in 2002. Then it outdid itself in 2017, hammering for approximately $5 million. You'd think imperial taste sets a high bar, but the next Rolex doesn't need an emperor's name. It needs no name at all, because only one was ever made, and its nickname says everything: the unicorn. At number 2, it's the Rolex Daytona 6265, the unicorn. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Rolex produced Daytonas in steel or the occasional yellow gold. But white gold? They made exactly one Daytona 6265 in 18-karat white gold. Created in the early 1970s and delivered to a German retailer, the unicorn is a singular specimen in every sense of the word. The dial is black sigma, the sigma marks at the bottom denoting white gold hour markers, with contrasting white subdials that give it a sharp panda aesthetic. And unlike standard gold 6265s, which typically came on leather straps, this one was eventually paired with a matching white gold oyster bracelet sourced separately, because Rolex never made one for it. Even Rolex couldn't accessorize something they only built once. For years, the unicorn lived in the legendary collection of John Goldberger, one of the most respected names in vintage watch collecting, kept under the radar until he decided to sell it for charity. When it hit Phillips in 2018, the community lost its collective mind. Bidding was ferocious. Final price? $5.9 million. Even modern platinum Daytonas can't match its aura, because aura isn't something you manufacture. It's something that happens when only one of something exists. And now, finally, we're down to the one Rolex to rule them all. A watch so famous it made global headlines when the gavel struck. A watch that was once given away for free to a boyfriend in the 1980s, and 30 years later, it sold for more than any wristwatch in history. At number 1, it's Paul Newman's Rolex Daytona 6239. Here it is, the most expensive Rolex ever sold, the most legendary wristwatch in collecting history, and the payoff to the promise I made at the top. In the late 1960s, actor and racing driver Paul Newman was given a Rolex Daytona Reference 6239 with an exotic dial by his wife, Joanne Woodward. She inscribed the case back with 3 words: "Drive carefully, me." It was a love note disguised as an engraving. Newman wore it for years while racing, inadvertently sparking a craze for exotic dial Daytonas that had previously been slow sellers. Rolex produced roughly 2,000 to 3,000 Daytona 6239s with the exotic dial. They initially sat on shelves. Then, Newman's cool factor turned them into the most sought-after vintage watches on the planet. Every exotic dial Daytona is now called a Paul Newman Daytona, because one man made an entire reference desirable just by wearing it. But here's the twist that turns this from a great story into an unbelievable one. In the 1980s, Newman casually gave the watch to his daughter's boyfriend. The watch that would one day become the most expensive Rolex in history, handed over like a parting gift, inscription and all. Fast forward to 2017. That very watch appears at Phillips in a sale called Winning Icons. 12 minutes of bidding. The room is silent between paddles, and then the gavel strikes. $17.8 million. The room erupted. This wasn't just a watch sale, it was history being made. A piece that was once worth a few $100s became a $17.8 million trophy. The buyer didn't just get a super rare Rolex, they got a piece of Hollywood, a piece of motorsport, and a love note from Joanne Woodward, all on one wrist. More importantly, it marked the moment the mainstream world woke up to the wild, wonderful world of vintage watches. One object, one auction, and everything changed. Close. These 10 Rolexes redefine what rare means. Which Rolex on this list hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. I'm betting the answer splits between the Paul Newman and the Bao Dai, but prove me wrong. And if you love this countdown, you'll want to see our deep dive into Jay-Z's insane watch collection. Because once you've seen what untouchable looks like, the rest of luxury collecting starts to feel almost ordinary. Click on the video to keep the tour rolling.